and do cutting-edge type of corporations in technology, in terms of pharmaceuticals and electronics and computers and so on and so forth. That's where the UK needs to go, is to more high-tech, cutting-edge technology, not building automobiles and things of that nature.
Tony Glasling, on 2 occasions you mentioned, that I counted, you mentioned that the EU wants to punish the UK. Now, I'm going to use Mark Thornton's words that it's not like the EU has such a shiny report card in terms of its economic stats when you look at it as a whole, especially with 3 countries such as France, Italy, and Spain running such high debts. So how do you think the EU, based on what you have said, is going to punish the UK in terms of these talks?
Well, this is what it will do. I think this is what we'll be seeing, and it's what we've already seen from Brussels, is really just simply harsh words for Britain, saying, you know, you're not going to get what you want. It's going to be basically a minimal deal from us. We're going, you know, we're not going to negotiate unless we absolutely have to. And it's an arrogance, which I think is the reason why so many people across Europe, looking at the financial record of Brussels and also the record of the dealing with the migrant crisis particularly, have decided that they don't want anything much more to do with Brussels. Of course, the reason for that is that nobody in Europe has ever elected anybody to run the EU. It's run by this unelected commission of appointees. In fact, what we do in our individual countries around Europe is once we get rid of a politician, like, for example, Leon Britton, who was removed here under the Thatcher government, under lots of allegations of the VI paedophile scandal back in the 1980s, plus the Labour leader Neil Kinnock, people who've been thrown out either by scandals or simply by the electorate thinking, well, we don't want this person in charge, we're going to kick them out at the election. These people are then put in charge of Europe at the European Commission. So that's one of the reasons I think they just don't stand much chance at all of succeeding in this project anymore. Yes, you're absolutely right about the effect that the economic policies have had in countries like Spain, Italy, Greece particularly has had a terrible time. Also, of course, with its democracy, because the Greeks, as the cradle of democracy, they voted to get out of the euro not last summer, the summer before. It still hasn't happened. So that's the way I think that we are characterising the EU now, is they're not really interested in what ordinary people think. They have no interest whatever in democracy. They're using the media constantly to try and spin and spin and spin to keep control. And also, as Donald Trump, the president-elect, just about to become president of the US, said this week, just earlier this week, he's talking about the EU being really just there for Germany. And if you have a look at the economic figures, I would agree. Germany has done very well out of all of this. They're now desperate for labourers. One of the reasons that Merkel has embraced the migrants there is because they need people to work in their factories. Here in Britain, we are in a totally the opposite position. The factories are mostly gone. And the migrant labour is simply being used to undermine the basic working conditions of everybody here. That isn't surprising, really. It shouldn't be too much of a surprise, because the EU, I think, has been effectively designed. It was designed in 1942 in Berlin. Many people point to this document, the Europäische Wirtschaftsgemeinschaft, designed in Nazi Germany to run an occupied Europe. And there is evidence that this is the model that the EU was built on, this thing from 1942 that the Nazis cooked up. And also, I would suggest people look at the survival after World War II of Hitler's treasurer, Martin Bormann, because there's been a lot of contention about whether this guy really survived the war. I can tell you almost 100% that he did survive, and there's been a big attempt to cover up whether he did survive. He survived in South America, and there's some very good evidence. Paul Manning, the CBS US journalist, has proved this pretty comprehensively, that there was an attempt, an underground Reich, after the Second World War, and even Boris Johnson has pointed this out. The EU is just what Hitler wanted.